For years, fans watched John Reardon bring Detective Charlie Hudson to life, a man whose loyalty, courage, and bond with his canine partner Rex became the heart of Hudson and Rex. But when Reardon suddenly went quiet, when his name disappeared from the spotlight, the silence spoke louder than words. Now, after months of questions, he's finally spoken, and what he revealed has left fans stunned. Because behind the smiles, behind the lights, and behind the perfectly trained Rex was a truth no one expected. Before the mystery began, there was only success. John Reardon wasn't just another actor playing a detective. He was the heartbeat of Hudson and Rex from the very first episode. Viewers connected with his calm confidence, his warmth, and his on-screen chemistry with Diesel, the German Shepherd who played Rex, together. They weren't just solving crimes, they were building something real, a friendship that felt human. People didn't just watch the show. They felt it. The idea of a detective working side by side with a canine partner wasn't new, but John brought something different. He made Charlie Hudson believable, not a superhero, but a man with patience, empathy, and quiet strength. Every glance he shared with Rex carried meaning. Every smile seemed genuine. Behind that, of course, was John's real bond with Diesel. Off camera, they spent hours together. Trainers said Diesel listened to John like family, not like a co-star. It was this chemistry that made the show more than just another police drama. It became a comfort show for millions. The early days were pure excitement. The series, filmed in Newfoundland, had that raw coastal beauty, the kind of scenery that matched the honesty of its lead. John loved that atmosphere. In interviews, he spoke about how peaceful it was to shoot there, how the community embraced the production. For him, it wasn't just a job. It was a chance to live something meaningful. He once said that acting with Diesel reminded him of the importance of trust, that it wasn't about pretending, it was about feeling. As the seasons passed, John Reardon became a face everyone recognized. He was praised for his steady presence, not flashy, not over the top, but grounded. While many TV stars chased headlines, John kept his life private. No controversies, no scandals, just dedication to his craft. But that quiet focus also built a mystery around him. Fans started wondering who John really was when the cameras stopped rolling. And that mystery grew stronger with every year of success. The chemistry between Hudson and Rex became the show's identity. Critics wrote that the partnership was one of the most genuine in modern TV. Kids loved it for the dog, adults for the emotion, and pet owners saw their own bonds reflected on screen. That kind of connection doesn't come easy. Behind every perfect scene was a long day of shooting, training, and retakes. John's patience was legendary. He never rushed Diesel, never forced a moment. He once joked that his best co-star never complained about lines, just treats. But even as everything looked perfect on screen, cracks slowly began to appear behind the scenes. Long shooting hours, emotional exhaustion, and the pressure of keeping a hit show alive were beginning to take a toll. Crew members noticed John becoming quieter between takes, more distant during interviews. He wasn't unhappy, just tired. The kind of tired that doesn't come from lack of sleep, but from carrying too much for too long. Still, he pushed on. Every new season brought more love from fans, more praise, more expectations. But the same calmness that made him so admired was also what made his silence later so haunting. Because when someone like John, steady, loyal, and devoted, suddenly stops speaking, people notice. The man who gave everything to his role, to his fans, and to Rex, had something heavy on his mind. No one could have guessed that behind the calm smile and gentle humor was a man struggling to balance passion with peace. What looked like stability was, in truth, quiet tension. And when that silence finally broke, when John Reardon finally spoke his truth, it became clear that his story wasn't just about leaving a TV show. It was about reclaiming his life. It started with whispers. At first, just a few comments on fan pages, a few tweets from worried viewers. Why hasn't John been in any new interviews? Why didn't he show up for the press event? Why is the show promoting new episodes without him? The silence around John Reardon became its own story. And as the weeks passed, silence turned into speculation, speculation into wild theories. Suddenly, everyone had an answer, but no one had the truth. Some said it was creative differences. Others claimed burnout. A few believed there had been a fallout between John and the producers. There were even rumors about his health, though none of them were based on fact. But that's what happens when a familiar face disappears. People fill the silence with stories of their own. Fans who had watched him every week for years couldn't imagine Hudson and Rex without him. They didn't want to believe he'd simply walked away. Then came the entertainment blogs, the tabloids, the so-called insiders. Articles appeared with headlines like, "Is John Reardon done with Hudson and Rex?" Or "Behind the Smile, the real reason John is missing from set." Some claimed an argument had broken out over creative direction. Others suggested John wanted to explore film roles instead of being tied to a series. It was all guesswork, 1,000 puzzle pieces that didn't fit together. Still, it kept people talking. Fans turned detectives, analyzing every small clue. They rewatched old interviews, studying his tone, his body language, his pauses. Was he hinting at something? Did that smile in the Season 5 wrap-up video feel forced? Online forums became crowded with debates. One post would say, "He looked so tired in the last promo. Maybe he needed a break." Another would reply, "No way. He loved that show." Something must have happened behind the scenes, but what people didn't realize was how heavy fame can feel when you're known for being calm. When you've built your image around kindness, grace, and patience, people forget you're human. They forget that exhaustion doesn't always mean anger. Sometimes it just means emptiness. Insiders who worked on the show quietly admitted that John had been carrying more weight than anyone realized. Long hours, endless retakes, and a growing sense that he had nothing left to give. Behind every smiling photo, there were signs of wear. Crew members noticed he stayed longer after filming, sitting with Diesel quietly, just petting him in silence. Some thought he was rehearsing lines, but those who knew him better understood it was his way of saying goodbye without actually saying it. Still, the network didn't confirm anything. They avoided direct answers, calling it a scheduling break or creative rest, but fans could tell something wasn't right. When a show loses its emotional center, it changes everything. And for Hudson and Rex, that center had always been John Reardon. The theories only got louder. Some fans blamed producers for pushing him too hard. Others said maybe John was frustrated with repetitive storylines, wanting his character to evolve. A few believed he was struggling privately, that maybe the pressure of being the face of a beloved series had quietly drained him. In truth, John had always been private. He didn't post much, rarely gave personal interviews. So when he vanished from the public eye, it didn't seem alarming at first. But as the silence stretched on, it became clear this wasn't just another quiet phase. Something had shifted, something deep and personal. A turning point came when an anonymous crew member gave a small hint in an interview. Sometimes, even the most loyal hearts need to step away before they lose themselves completely. That line spread like wildfire. Fans quoted it everywhere, trying to decode its meaning. Was it about John? Was it about Charlie Hudson? Or was it simply a truth about how much it costs to give your all, season after season? Then came a brief mention in a podcast, not from John, but from someone close to the production, saying he had been reevaluating his future. Those words hit hard, because reevaluating doesn't sound like anger. It sounds like sadness, like someone who loves something deeply but realizes love alone isn't enough to keep going. The energy in the fandom changed after that. The outrage turned to worrying. Fans began writing messages not of frustration, but of gratitude, thanking him for his years of warmth and sincerity. The conversations softened. People began to understand that maybe, just maybe, this wasn't a story of betrayal or conflict, but one of burnout, of emotional truth. What no one yet knew was that John Reardon's silence wasn't about secrecy. It was about recovery. It was about a man trying to breathe again after years of pretending everything was fine. His exit wasn't a scandal. It was a quiet, human decision, one that would soon make sense when he finally spoke. And when he did, the rumors that once filled the air would fall silent. Because the truth, as it turned out, wasn't shocking because it was dramatic. It was shocking because it was real. For months, there was nothing but quiet. The kind of silence that felt heavy, not empty, but full of things left unsaid. Fans waited. Journalists asked. The producers dodged. And John Reardon, the man everyone wanted to hear from, stayed invisible. No interviews, no posts, just absence. It became almost a mystery of its own. Then, out of nowhere, he spoke. Not in a flashy press conference or a dramatic announcement, but in a calm, thoughtful way that only John could. And when he finally did, his words didn't sound like the confession people were expecting. They sounded like release. He began by saying something simple. I didn't leave because I stopped loving the work. I left because I started forgetting how to love anything else. That one sentence stopped the internet cold. It wasn't about drama. It wasn't about conflict. It was about exhaustion, the kind that sneaks up slowly and takes away joy piece by piece. For years, John had been the image of calm professionalism. While others saw a confident detective, he was quietly fighting to stay connected to who he really was. Hudson and Rex, he said, gave me so much. But somewhere along the way, I realized I was giving more than I had left. He spoke about the show with deep affection. There was no bitterness in his tone, no hidden jab at anyone. He talked about the early days, the excitement, the laughter, the bond with Diesel. He described what it was like working with a dog that wasn't just an actor but a friend. Rex wasn't trained to fake loyalty, he said softly. He just gave it. That line hit people in the heart. Because in many ways, Rex represented everything John stood for: loyalty, patience, and quiet strength. The truth wasn't that he wanted to leave Rex behind. It was that he didn't want to lose himself trying to stay that. In his rare interview, he admitted that fame had never been his goal. He wanted to tell stories that made people feel something real. But the longer Hudson and Rex went on, the harder it became to separate John the actor from Charlie the detective. The hours grew longer, the stakes higher, and the demand endless. He wasn't complaining, he was just being honest. You start to wake up one day and realize, he said, that you know your lines better than you know yourself. That truth resonated deeply with anyone who'd ever given too much to something they loved. He also spoke about the pressure of perfection, the idea that because the show was wholesome and family-friendly, he always had to appear just as flawless. Every smile, every public moment, every fan encounter carried weight. People see you as a character who never gives up, he said, and after a while, you start to feel like you're not allowed to. That quiet confession revealed the emotional cost of carrying a role that millions admired. He wasn't running away from success. He was walking toward balance. When the interviewer asked about the decision to finally step away, John paused. He didn't use big words or complicated reasons. He simply said, sometimes you need to let the story go before it stops feeling true. That single line summed up everything. For him, it wasn't about quitting, it was about honoring what the show once meant. He believed that staying too long could turn something genuine into something hollow. He'd rather leave with gratitude than regret. He also talked about the people behind the scenes, the cast, the crew, the fans. He thanked them all with quiet sincerity. Every handshake, every letter, every person who told me Rex reminded them of their own dog. That's what I'll carry forever. There was a softness in his words that showed how deeply he still cared. He wasn't angry or disappointed. He was simply done. Peacefully done. But the most surprising part of his message came near the end. He admitted that during his final season, he'd already started feeling the need to disappear. There were moments, he said, when I'd look around on set, and even surrounded by people I loved, I felt invisible. That's when I knew something inside me was changing. He didn't blame anyone. He didn't call it burnout or conflict. He called it honesty. And in that honesty, there was healing. When his words went public, the reaction was overwhelming. Fans cried, not out of anger, but out of understanding. Many said they finally saw the man behind the uniform, not Detective Hudson, but John Reardon, the human being. His statement wasn't a scandal. It was a reminder that even the strongest heroes need rest. For years, he had carried a show that brought comfort to millions. Now, he was learning how to comfort himself. His silence had finally spoken, not through gossip, not through headlines, but through truth. A truth so simple it hurt to hear. Sometimes, walking away isn't weakness. It's the only way to stay whole. And with that, John Reardon closed one chapter, not with anger or regret, but with grace. He didn't vanish from the story. He simply stepped out of frame, leaving behind a legacy built not on noise, but on quiet courage. It began like a faint echo, small, uncertain, almost too quiet to notice. But echoes have a way of growing, especially when silence surrounds them. When John Reardon suddenly vanished from the Hudson and Rex spotlight, it didn't take long for curiosity to turn into chaos. Fans who had grown used to his calm smile and steady voice found themselves refreshing social media pages, searching interviews, and replaying clips, desperate for clues. The show continued, but something felt off. The screen was missing its heartbeat. At first, people tried to stay hopeful. Maybe he was just on a break, maybe there was a secret project, maybe he'd return stronger than ever. But as days turned to weeks, that hope began to shift. Online fan groups started buzzing with theories, hundreds of them. He must have had a disagreement with the writers. He's focusing on family. He's shooting another show in secret. Every new theory sounded more dramatic than the last, and yet none carried proof. What made it worse was that John, known for his transparency and kindness, said absolutely nothing. Not a word. That silence became the spark that lit an entire storm of speculation. Entertainment outlets caught on fast. Articles began flooding the internet with bold headlines, "Trouble behind the scenes." Reardon's mysterious absence explained. The secret Hudson and Rex feud. Most of them repeated the same vague rumors, citing anonymous insiders. Some claimed he clashed with producers over creative choices. Others suggested he was unhappy with how his character was being written. None of it was confirmed, but in the digital age, truth doesn't matter as much as attention. And attention, John Reardon had plenty of, but the fans weren't just curious, they were emotional. People had grown attached to him, not just as an actor, but as a symbol of integrity. His character, Detective Charlie Hudson, wasn't just another TV hero. He was steady, loyal, dependable. To see that man vanish without explanation felt personal. Viewers from around the world began writing long posts about what the show meant to them, about how Hudson and Rex helped them through dark days. Many couldn't separate the character from the man who played him. And so, when John disappeared, it felt like losing a friend. Behind the scenes, whispers started spreading among the crew. Some said he'd been struggling with exhaustion, working long hours with little rest. Others hinted he'd wanted the show to take new creative risks, deeper emotional arcs, more realism, less formula. But networks rarely change a formula that works, and Hudson and Rex was a hit. Ratings were solid, fans were loyal, and the chemistry between man and dog was television gold. If there were frustrations, they were quietly buried beneath professionalism. John, being the calm and collected soul he was, never made a scene. That was never his way. Still, the signs were there if you looked closely. In interviews during the last season, he smiled less. His answers were shorter, more reflective. He often spoke about gratitude and closing chapters, words that, in hindsight, carried more weight than anyone realized. One fan even commented, "He talks like someone saying goodbye." But we just didn't want to believe it. The truth was, something deep inside him was already shifting. Even before he left, then came the online debates. Fans began taking sides, some defending him, others demanding answers. "He owes us an explanation," wrote one frustrated viewer. "He doesn't owe anyone anything," replied another. The digital noise grew louder, drowning out reason. It became clear that people weren't just reacting to an actor's absence, they were reacting to uncertainty. And in the absence of truth, imagination took control. Meanwhile, Reardon stayed silent. No statements, no posts, no hints. To some, that silence was suspicious. To others, it was proof of grace. But the longer it lasted, the more intense the rumors became. Some even claimed he had left the industry entirely. A few believed there had been a secret health scare. Others thought he was taking time to focus on his family and mental peace. Every theory reflected something people feared or hoped for, but all of them missed the same point. Sometimes silence isn't hiding something. Sometimes silence is the message. And still, through all the speculation, one thing remained constant: respect. Even in the noise, no one spoke ill of him. No one called him ungrateful or arrogant. Because deep down, everyone knew John Reardon wasn't the type to walk away without a reason. He was thoughtful, careful, and deeply private. If he had chosen to step back, it wasn't on impulse. It was deliberate. It was quiet strength that, as weeks turned into months, the frenzy began to fade, replaced by something softer: understanding. Fans began realizing that maybe their favorite detective wasn't lost in mystery at all. Maybe he was just finding peace. But before that peace could make sense, John had to speak for himself. And when he finally did, his words would prove that the truth wasn't hidden behind contracts or conflicts. It was hidden inside the silence itself. Because what he revealed wasn't about fame or production drama. It was about what it means to love something so much that it starts to hurt, and what it takes to finally let it go.